Hello, my name is Dr. Mohab, CEO at INNOVETY, and I'm the lead consultant for the mission to develop a roadmap for Lebanon's universities to strengthen their technology transfer capabilities. The goal of this project was to establish a solid technology transfer process at universities and to give researchers the knowledge and the tools to innovate and to commercialize their research. In order to do that, we followed a four-stage methodology. We started at the beginning to create a framework for the technology transfer process, and then to assess the current status of that framework here in Lebanon, and then conduct from that gap analysis, and finally come up with our recommendations. While we were doing the gap analysis and the recommendations, we were conducting both primary research and secondary research and applying best practices that we achieved from our experts in Germany. It's also important to understand that the recommendations that we came up with, there were six main principles that we were following. Number one, recommendations should not have any kind of conflict with any legislation issues in Lebanon. Number two, because Lebanon has a relatively small market, the internationalization component of the technologies is very, very important to be taken into account. Number three, it's important to capitalize on the existing resources that Lebanese universities have, and it was important to identify champions to achieve the institutional sustainability of these recommendations. Number five, we also looked at some models such as the private-public partnerships that would allow private sector and government to collaborate to implement some of these recommendations. And finally, we took the stakeholders' maturity into account so that these recommendations can be pragmatic when it comes to execution. So this is how the technology transfer framework looks like, and it is really comprised of three main pillars: research management, innovation toolboxes, and innovation commercialization. The research management component has to do with the elements that allow you to do the applied research, convert it to a prototype, and finally into a product that can actually be commercialized. The innovation toolboxes include the necessary elements such as intellectual property rights and the necessary information for researchers in order to conduct their research and to be able to apply it to the market in a proper way. And finally, the innovation commercialization, we look at it from two different views: either commercialization in terms of licensing or selling technologies to the market and to industries, or that it would be a reason for spinning off startups from these universities to the outside world. So we started off applying the framework in order to assess the status quo of the Lebanese ecosystem. And here you can see that we've basically categorized the different players in the ecosystem across these three main pillars of the technology transfer, which are the research management, the innovation toolboxes, and the commercialization component. So let's actually have a look at each one of them very quickly to understand who are the main players in each one of these pillars. So if we start off with the research management, we will effectively be looking at funding models and awards, technical support, infrastructure and facilities, and the kind of collaborations that exist between different stakeholders. So you'd find under the applied research grants that there are a number of entities that provide these kind of grants. You would find the AUF, where they do funding for research and thesis and collaborative projects. You will find the CNRS, of course, that provides grant research programs, international projects, and doctoral fellows. You would find, of course, the LIRA program, which is the matchmaker between universities and industry, and they can actually cover up to 50% of the budget of certain projects once there is a collaboration with industry. Another type of grants, which is the prototype and product development grants. Not too many entities actually develop these kind of grants. The Center for Innovation and Technology has actually innovation vouchers that try to fill in the Death Valley gap that exists in these kind of grants. There are a lot of grants in the applied research, and there's fairly a good amount of grants in the early commercialization part. But the valley of the death, which is the product and the prototyping stage, not too many support that. From the applied research awards, there are awards that are being delivered and given from universities such as the Notre Dame University. The CNRS has annual Research Excellence Awards. They have Excellence Career Awards. Even the LIRA program, they provide graduating projects and prizes and doctoral prizes. For the technical support, we have the Lebanese Association for Scientific Research and the Universities Association for Lebanon, which both provide capacity building, exchange programs, and different scholarships. If we look at the infrastructure and facilities, we can find that the IRI, which is the Industrial Research Institute, they actually provide members with access to analysis and testing labs, consulting and training and certifications. Whereas Beratec's Fab Lab, which is a lovely physical space that provides fabrication equipment, workshops, and mentorship to researchers and entrepreneurs, is a very good example. From the collaborations, there are different models. CNRS tries to create these kind of collaborative research projects. Qut is a very nice example of a cluster where there is collaboration between different members from the industry. Beirut Research and Innovation Center, BRIC, is also a lovely model by which there is collaboration between universities and the private sector in order to fulfill the needs of some of the international companies, particularly the Swiss ones. Also, Lebanese Softshore and the Lebanese Agriculture Research Institute are also two examples for these type of collaborations. Now let's have a look at the innovation toolboxes and see who are the main players. So when we look at the intellectual property side, whether it is for the purpose of supporting or publicizing its importance in the Lebanese ecosystem, we would find the IRI is actually providing workshops on topics related to IP. The Ministry of Economy and Trade, they are also supporting the patent office of the ministry and to provide that kind of support to businesses. The Investment Development Authority of Lebanon, IDAL, also provides education around IP protection, copyright, and trademarks. IP agents also share information about patents, and they provide a different type of seminars at universities to build awareness about this important topic. At the AUB, there's the Creative Research and Innovation Center that actually supports graduate students in terms of spinning off their startups, and therefore they need to learn a lot about their IP issues. And finally, the technology transfer offices, particularly those that are existent at the AUB or the University of Saint Joseph, are also good examples to the idea of promoting the importance of IP and to supporting researchers in these universities to protect and to evaluate the kind of intellectual property that they have. From information services, there are a number of different entities, and I don't want to name them all because you can definitely go back to the report that we've developed. But just to name a few, we have the Lebanese Ministry of Education and Higher Education. They have some nice information on websites that could be of relevance to researchers. AUB, for example, has a grant office that provides different listings of different entities and research projects. Lebanese science journals, and you would find BRIC. They publish newsletters around the latest projects, the latest findings and success stories that they develop. Ministry of Economy and Trade also has a website that you can know from it different types of laws, regulation procedures, services, and documents. IRI, WIPO, Association of Lebanon Industrials, and of course United Nations ESQA, who is actually one of the leading entities that publishes research and reports related to innovation and technology commercialization. So this was kind of a summary about the entities that provide these kind of different information related to technology transfer. The final pillar we want to have a look at is the innovation commercialization pillar. And here I remind you that we have the part that has to do with licensing the technology and the part that has to do with spinning off startups. Very few entities actually provide support in the area of licensing of the technology. So the CNRS, for example, they advise government on the progress and the issues related to these kind of licensing issues. Naturally, the technology transfer offices at the AUB and University of Saint Joseph, they support researchers to commercialize their inventions. And Beratec, which is one of the main pillars of innovation in Lebanon, they have programs such as the Innovation Factory and From Research to Innovation that again support researchers in the fields of food, water, and energy to commercialize these products into the market in a proper way. On the other hand, when you look at spin-offs, you will find that there are different entities that support these kind of spin-offs coming out of universities. So we have the Maroon Shammas Recognition Award for Technology Innovation that recognizes the creators of innovative technological products in AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, and that is typically coupled with a monetary award at the end. We have Agritech, which is an innovation hub around agribusiness in Lebanon that offers an incubation program that supports entrepreneurs to establish businesses in the agribusiness sector. We have Diane Foundation also that again supports startups and SMEs in the green sector. We have Cedars, we have the Lebanese Women Angel Fund, and of course Beratech at the end, who provide a series of incubation and acceleration programs and provide office spaces to different startups. In addition, we have the Asher Center, Thomas Reuter SME Accelerator, Speed, Flat Six Labs. So all these are all different types of incubators and accelerators. And here, the idea was not to cover all of them, but only to mention the ones that have a little bit of a connection with universities, which is the prime objective of this mission. After we've conducted the status quo analysis of Lebanon's technology transfer ecosystem, it was important to identify the different kind of gaps that existed. These gaps could be related to institutions and supporting tools. It could be about human capital. It's about how research and education is conducted and the culture of innovation inside these universities, and also the kind of infrastructure that is available. So we looked actually at many different gaps, but the 10 gaps that we felt that are most pronounced, number one, we found that there's a lot of funding that exists for applied research, but very limited funding for prototype and product development, as well as go-to-market. So that is certainly a gap there. Number two, we didn't find any kind of formal way in order to assess the market needs and to have a proper ability to connect between research and these kind of market needs. Number three, there were very few curricular activities and courses that exist in these universities that had to do with innovation and commercialization. The other thing was that there was limited fully equipped research and prototyping facilities that exist in these universities. Number four, you would either have an absence of an IP policy at universities, or there is an issue that has to do with the dissemination of this IP policy. Lebanon has a huge diaspora, as we know. So the idea is that universities do not actually track where these diaspora do business. They're not creating channels to connect, and they're not leveraging the opportunity to develop business opportunities with these diaspora. So that is also a gap. In addition, there are limited technology transfer structures that are existing in universities, and those that exist, I think we can do a little bit of a better job related to the technical, soft skills, and business skills of the staff in these technology transfer offices. Lebanon has a relatively small market, so incubation programs should start to focus on regional and international markets and to pay more attention to researchers, and that is a gap that we saw. Finally, there is limited information sources that have to do with technology, market reports, IP information, and success stories. And that is something that special attention should be paid to when we're doing our recommendations. So let's start talking about the kind of recommendations that we came up with and the ones that we think should construct a roadmap for universities. Now, there are two approaches here. There's a top-down approach and there's a bottom-up approach. The top-down approach means that these are recommendations that top management will actually apply, and they will actually kind of have a very strong role in terms of making sure that it gets implemented. The bottom up means that it is things that are naturally existent or should naturally be existent in order to infuse and to strengthen the culture of innovation and technology transfer at the university. So let's start with a top-down roadmap for universities at the beginning. Now, when you look at the roadmaps, you can actually think about it in two different ways. There's a roadmap that can support licensing and selling of technologies to industry, and there's another roadmap that would support the spin-off component of having startups coming out of universities. So the first part of the roadmap is identifying who are the implementing bodies when it comes to matchmaking between universities and industry. Matchmaking activities can be carried out by different entities based on the university's maturity level when it comes to commercialization. If you have low maturity and you don't have any kind of technology transfer structure, you can assign champions to departments. And those roles would be to identify commercializable technologies developed by each department, whether they are students, researchers, or faculty members, and to support them throughout the whole process of connecting them with industry players. Number two, you can have a centralized technology transfer office, similar to what the CNRS was trying to do, right? But you can also do it when you have 2 or 3 universities together and they kind of centralize their technology transfer operations instead of having individual ones for each university separately. Number 3, you can establish industry liaisons. And industry liaisons, they are professionals who do not necessarily have to come from the same university. They can be external to the university, but who have experience in different industries. And their role is to act as a focal point between the university and the industry and to formulate these kind of partnerships. Number 4, you can actually establish a formal university technology transfer office. And those are the ones that exist presently at the American University in Beirut, AUB, and the University of San Joseph. And their role, of course, is to support researchers to identify market opportunities for the research, while also informing the university about external opportunities. Number 5 is to adopt the collaborative lab model, which is called CoLab. CoLab is a consortium that involves at least one company and one research unit that would come from a university for the purpose of solving a large-scale problem with the potential of some kind of positive socioeconomic return, or that can encourage synergies between different players. And the role of these labs is to develop new forms of interaction and to create a relationship between research, innovation, and social economic development activities. Number 6 is to establish a decentralized entity such as BRIC and to collaborate with the private sector in order to manage activities between international companies and researchers. Next, we need to do the planning exercise, which is to identify who are the stakeholders that we would like to connect with as a university. So what we want to do is to create a database of stakeholders inside and outside of Lebanon and to categorize based on the strength of connection between the university and these stakeholders. So they could be quick wins, which are entities and individuals that we presently as a university have strong connections with, which could be alumni or existing partners or faculty. They could be also entities that we used to have a relationship with and that now we're trying to reconnect with them, or we need to establish new connections altogether. This stage is very important because it allows you to identify who would be the most promising entities that you can actually start collaborating with. Next comes the part where you do what we call the mapping exercise. So we need to do actually 2 types of mappings. We need to do an internal mapping and we need to do an external mapping. The internal mapping, universities in that case identify the different kind of departments and research centers that they have, and they typically put that on the y-axis. And then they match them with the technologies, projects, and intellectual properties that come from these different research areas. And in that way, you're able to do a very good internal mapping between the kind of departments that you have and between the kind of projects and intellectual property that you have inside the university. Step number 2, which is to do the external mapping, which is to identify various type of applications, various type of business models for each of the identified technologies or projects and to map them to some kind of an industrial value chain. So if you look at this example, what we basically try to do is we pick a particular sector, let's say the oil and gas sector, and we break down this oil and gas sector down its value chain. So you have, for example, extraction, transportation, refining, distribution, and all that is put on the x-axis. On the y-axis, you would actually identify the kind of technologies and research that's being done inside the university. And the points of intersection define for you areas of opportunity where you can actually commercialize your technology. Similar to that, you can do that for other value chains, such as food and beverages, such as the construction industry, such as healthcare, such as education. So the amount of opportunity that you can create for the technologies and research that you're doing at the university are endless. You can have a lot of those. Next, once you've defined the kind of technologies that you have in the universities and the kind of stakeholders and partners that you can actually commercialize it to, now it's very important to have some kind of a policy that governs the kind of royalties and the kind of valuation that you would need to have for each one of these technologies. Now, I'm not saying that universities, if they do not have an IP policy, they cannot do that stage. On the contrary, if you don't have any kind of IP policy, you will just need to work on each one of these cases on a case-by-case basis. And my recommendation would be that you can create what we call packaged licensed technologies, which are basically involve packaging quality research outputs with IP protected results, with any kind of valuable intellectual assets, and selling them and negotiating mutually satisfying royalty sharing agreements with the outside world, but also with researchers that you have inside the university. So that can be a very good standing point. It could be a very good starting point for you. If you do have an IP policy, then that's great. Then you would use that as a basis for your negotiation. And we all know that IP policy should have components that have to do with intellectual property ownership, invention evaluation, technology commercialization, conflicts of interest, obligations of faculty, and so forth. So this stage is very important to analyze the kind of legal agreements that you would have between the university and different industry partners. Next comes the question of how do I actually fund these kind of technology transfer structures? Well, there are typically three ways that you can consider. Number one, you can consider funding that from the indirect costs of research being conducted by universities. Every international grant that the university can actually implement, there's a component which is called indirect costs, which is somewhere between the 5 and 10%. The university can actually use these indirect costs to support and to establish such technology transfer offices. Number two, you can actually apply for local and international innovation funds from the USAID, from the European Commission, to actually establish these kind of technology transfer offices. Once you have these kind of structures, technology transfer structures, you can actually put as part of their mandate that they would support industry in terms of IPR management issues, or people inside these technology transfer offices can deliver workshops. So you can generate different sources of revenue that would come from these kind of offices. In addition to all these points that formulate the roadmap, it is very important to have what we call adjacent activities. These are activities that need to be done across the board throughout all the different stages that we've been talking about. And one of the models that would be interesting for universities to look at is what we call the GICO model, which is the Grants, Information and Collaboration Office. And what this office does is that it is responsible for organizing, sponsoring events, competitions, seminars, and most importantly, meetups that exist between universities and industry, or university and another university. In addition, we can also establish a program for undergraduate students to conduct research under the guidance and supervision of faculty members, postdoc fellows, and so forth. So these are very important components of what we call adjacent activities. They have to exist. A lot of seminars, a lot of meetups need to take place in the universities to encourage this kind of matchmaking between universities and industry players and different stakeholders at large. Now, if you look at the activities that are associated with the roadmaps in terms of supporting these spin-offs, we can actually start off with incentivizing students and faculty to spin off these technologies. And there are different ways that you can do that. You can do competitions, you can provide merit-based awards, you can create concepts such as for-credit industry internships, you can do a lot of cross-listing of courses between the engineering, science, and business schools in order to encourage students and researchers who have a technology background to go into the world and to understand the world of entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation management. Another thing that universities need to actually play a good role in is that a lot of the incubators and accelerators that exist in Lebanon don't really focus too much on startups that are based on university research. So one of the very important things that need to be looked at is that universities need to collaborate with existing incubators and accelerators to create a research-oriented incubation program that promotes more research-based spin-offs. And they can do that by, again, promoting these kind of incubation programs at universities. Universities can scout for innovative technologies that they have and that have good commercialization potential, and to showcase that to incubators and accelerators. They can connect startups with international networks, funding models, and commercialization opportunities. And finally, facilitate startups' access to their laboratories at other universities. So we just talked about leveraging and capitalizing on existing accelerators and incubators that are external to the university. But on the long run, the universities should have their own incubator inside the universities. An accelerator incubator that provides consultancy services to researchers, gives researchers access to tools and researchers that help them spin off their business, and a lot of networking and connection opportunities. And because we know that Lebanon has a relatively small market, these incubators should actually focus on international markets. So we need to identify technologies and business models with high potential in international markets. We need to be able to network with international entities with the purpose of licensing and selling some of these technologies. And we should have an opportunity to expose our startups in international conferences. So aside the activities that constitute the roadmap for licensing, selling technologies, or for supporting spin-offs, there are a set of enabling activities that universities should also do. Number one, activities that have to do with information services. Number two, networking and communication. And finally, collaboration. So the first thing that the university needs to do from an information standpoint is to publicize for their projects that they've been working on and that have been commercialized, to signal that the university is ready to connect with industry. The university should also promote success stories of researchers, students, faculty, alumni, and administration pertaining to innovation and commercialization. The university should also provide accurate and extensive information about things such as funding and grants available, IP policies and information, completed or ongoing projects and programs, and contact information and areas of expertise of all faculty members at the administration to open the opportunity for collaboration. From a networking and communication standpoint, universities should actually arrange internal roundtables, meetups, and seminars organized and attended by entities such as technology transfer personnel, university management, alumni offices, career offices. This is very important in order to communicate and to network between these different entities for the purpose of enhancing innovation and technology transfer activities. Universities should also support external roundtables, workshops, seminars, and talks, creating a database of available contacts and communicating with entities and individuals through newsletters, media plans to maintain communication with existing connections, which include the alumni, faculty, and any kind of industry collaborator. Finally, from a collaborations and partnerships standpoint, universities should collaborate in terms of creating a platform with other universities and research institutions that enables the open accessibility of the wide variety of facilities and laboratories that exist. This allows for facilitating researchers access to appropriate prototyping and testing tools and allowing outsiders to use facilities in exchange for a nominal fee. So all the actions that we've been talking about so far are considered to be actions pertaining to the top-down roadmap that we want to establish at each university. However, there are also some actions that are considered to be bottom-up. These are the actions that need to be existent in order to nurture the culture of innovation and technology transfer inside universities. They might not have a direct influence, but definitely an indirect impact would happen eventually. Number one, exchange programs. Universities should collaboratively carry out applied research projects with top international universities in their common area of concentration. This can be done through fully funded exchange programs whereby students can receive a full scholarship to complete their PhD program abroad, or for students to participate in an exchange program for a year in their university of choice as part of the program's network. Number 2, entrepreneurship and technology commercialization courses and activities. I cannot stress enough how important these cross-listed entrepreneurship and innovation management courses are to researchers and students who come from a science, technology, and engineering background. These kind of extracurricular activities that engage students in technology commercialization and innovation challenges are also equally important. Number 3, a startup bootcamp. Universities can engage their students in biannual startup bootcamps designed specifically for researchers who have limited knowledge about entrepreneurship but would like to spin off their research through doing capacity building, mentorship, matchmaking, and networking. Finally, number 4, senior management support. Increasing the awareness of senior management of the latest technology transfer practices through organizing executive seminars inviting top management is absolutely important. This is the only way to make sure that there's strong buy-in from the top management about any kind of innovation and technology transfer practices we want to do at the university. We discussed many activities that universities need to implement as part of the roadmap to successful technology transfer. However, there are other stakeholders in the ecosystem that also need to play an important role. For example, let's take government. Government, there are different initiatives that they need to take into account. The first one is related to the LIRA program. The LIRA program was a successful initiative governed by the CNRS to support collaboration between universities and industry. However, if this LIRA program would get registered as an independent legal entity, it can actually help the initiative to significantly scale. LIRA would be able to apply independently for funds from international donors and organizations such as the European Commission and the USAID to scale the support they deliver to universities and industry. LIRA would be able to partner with other entities and submit joint proposals in response to many regional and international RFPs. Next, government should initiate grants that tackle different stages of the technology transfer process. Basic to applied research grants are important. Prototype and go-to-market funds are important to allow researchers to transfer their prototypes to the market. International research grants are important by funding students to carry out collaborative research internationally or attend relevant workshops and events. Many countries such as France, the UK, and Japan would be happy to offer such research grants, either on a solely funded basis or a co-funded basis. And finally, diaspora researcher funds can also be quite important, where inviting and funding Lebanese researchers and professionals in the diaspora to support domestic research projects. Government should also support the establishment of decentralized entities to carry out and manage activities between international companies and local researchers in the Lebanese universities. This is exactly the same model as BRIC, the Beirut Research and Innovation Center. We need to see more entities like BRIC in Lebanon, for sure. Many startups have legal issues that either require them to ignore, hence affecting their business, or pay the big bucks to expensive legal firms to resolve. Government can establish what we call a legal accelerator. This legal accelerator would host freshly graduated lawyers to help them start their own practices by providing them with the resources, skills to support these startups. Finally, government can create online platforms that can help you inspire, educate, and connect researchers and entrepreneurs. This platform can be based on a PPP model, which is a public-private partnership model, whereby this platform would be owned by the government but implemented and managed by the private sector. This platform would have grants and research opportunities, would have information of interest for researchers and entrepreneurs, news, updates, resources. It could actually have a marketplace that consolidates the innovation projects in Lebanon. It could have an innovation map, which is a Google-enabled map to identify all innovation players in Lebanon to facilitate connections between the different players. It can have an open innovation activity component, whereby you can announce innovation challenges that allow researchers and students to work on industrial solutions. And finally, it can have a list of registered equipment in universities and research institutions for sharing between the different players. From the accelerators and incubators side, it is important for those entities to create a research-based accelerator. And therefore, these kind of accelerators and incubators would scout for these innovative technologies that have the highest commercialization potential among students, researchers, and university staff. They would connect these startups to international networks, and they would match these researchers with other participants and applicants. And finally, they would also be included as part of the matchmaking events that connect inventors with entrepreneurs who can help them start these kind of spin-offs and approach investors. These type of accelerators and incubators should have an international flavor in their program. They would offer trainings, workshops, and tools about international markets. They would provide business services. They would provide networking and mentorship services with international professionals. They would create what we call immersion programs, where we send the top performing startups to participate in demos outside. They would provide matchmaking services by platforms, events to increase linkages with international key players. They can provide soft landing services that supports participants to execute and implement their business plans in their targeted international markets. The last stakeholder that we look at are the intellectual property agents. They can provide training and capacity building for technology transfer offices, faculty members, students, researchers on relevant IP topics and how they can affect the research. IP agents can also play a role in the success of the legal accelerator we just talked about through training courses, internships, and access to different types of consultations. So in summary, this mission allowed us to understand the status quo of the innovation and technology transfer ecosystem in Lebanon. It allowed us to identify different types of gaps and to analyze them. Gaps that have to do with human resources, gaps that have to do with infrastructure, gaps that have to do with legislation. And then from there, we were able to develop roadmaps for universities. There we had top-down roadmaps and we had bottom-up roadmaps. Top-down roadmaps that would help with licensing and selling of technologies, spinning off startups, and bottom-up roadmaps that help with the whole culture of promoting technology transfer and innovation in the university. Finally, we mentioned the role of other stakeholders in the ecosystem: government, accelerators and incubators, and IP agents. And we have identified some key activities that each one of these stakeholders can actually implement. I want to acknowledge the time and the hard work of many people in this mission. Sarah Shawqi and Aya Abdel Halim from INNOVETY, Gerd Meyer, our German expert, Christelle Khalil, Rami Boujawda, and Matthias Fillen from the Next Society team, and 25 different experts who represent different stakeholders in Lebanon. Thank you so much.